Good morning, and welcome to Coffee with the Garden Club. So today we are going to talk about one of my very favorite fruit bushes, the beach plum. They are fun to grow. I don't know if anybody else chooses plants for the reasons that I choose them, but one of the reasons that I like to grow certain things is because I just find them fun. And beach plums, I think, are really a neat little bush. They grow anywhere from, say, 2 feet tall to 15 feet tall. They are a wild plant. They have not been cultivated extensively, so you don't always know exactly what you're getting, especially if you're growing them from seed. They grow along the eastern coast of the United States. They are native to the United States, and I have absolutely no doubt that people who predated the colonists, the First Nations people, cultivated these and encouraged them as a food source because they would have been one of the better fruits available to people living in the Americas at that time. You can buy beach plums from a nursery. You can buy beach plum bushes from a nursery. You can also forage for beach plums and plant them from seed, but there are some tricks that you probably want to know in order to successfully germinate them. First off, collecting them. The best way to find beach plums are very difficult to find in the fall when they are actually fruiting and ready for picking. The best time to start preparing is actually in the spring. The reason is that the beach plum bushes are easiest to find in the spring. You can find them in New England and points south along the seaboard. If you are in perhaps a nature or bird sanctuary near the ocean, if you are near the beach in general, in New England and on Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket, you can often find these bushes that are covered with white flowers. And that's when you want to make note of where they are. So you can come back in September or so and start checking on the beach plums there and see if they are ripe. If you haven't located them at that time, it's much harder to find them, but sometimes you do run across them. If you take a lot of walks out in New England or along the seacoast, you may end up running into a bush that has these tiny cherry-sized berries, but they're a very dark purple when they're ripe. Generally, on the whole, beach plums are dark purple. There may be reddish cultivars, but the ones that I've seen have all been dark purple, especially out in the wild. And so they're about the size of a cherry. They have a pit that is very much like a cherry, and they are like a very rustic flavored damson plum in taste. They are. I really like them because I don't mind a little bit of sourness in my fruit. Some people prefer to prepare them as a jam or a sauce because they can also benefit from a little bit of added sugar depending on your taste. They're actually related to plums and cherries. They are in the prunus family, but they are native to the United States. And so it's a neat opportunity for people in the States to plant something that is a domestic fruiting bush and produces a fairly decent size and, depending on the plant, sometimes prolific number of berries once they're mature. Now that's the catch. The beach plum takes a long time, at least in my experience, takes a long time to grow from a seed. I suppose that's true of a lot of plants, but I am a little impatient for beach plums sometimes. And so I have several fruiting bushes that are probably about 3 feet tall. They each produce quite a large number of berries for their size. I would like to have more, but it's taking a while for some of my tiny little seedlings to grow up. So the process of starting these beach plum seedlings it's a little tricky, but it can be done, and once you understand how to do it, it's not very hard. So first you would take your beach plum and you eat the plum and save the pit and make sure the pits are very, very clean. I tend to do that by putting a bunch of pits in my hand, rolling them between my 2 palms under a stream of water until all of the residue is gone. You might want to hit them with a quick bleach soak. I've recently learned about this from a friend, and it seems to be a good way of preparing fruit for either a cold stratification process or for a germination test. Now, a little bit about the bleach process. What was recommended to me, and you can look this up online and find your own version of it, but what was recommended to me was a 10% bleach solution, which is a very strong bleach solution. So there may be other ways of doing it, but a 10% bleach solution for about 10, maybe 15 minutes before drying the seeds. And so then, wash off the bleach. Of course, you want to get all of that off after you're done. And then you would dry your seeds out as per usual. Once you've dried them out for a couple of days, then you can take your beach plum seeds and put them into moist vermiculite. Now, when I say moist, I mean really just a little bit damp. It doesn't have to be very damp at all. You would want it to, if you squeeze it, you really don't want to get any drops of liquid out of it. So just to the point where you put your hand in it and you're like, okay, that's a little damp. That's how damp you want your vermiculite. And so I put a bunch of seeds into a Ziploc bag in vermiculite, put them in the fridge in November or so. And then as the winter wears on, eventually you'll probably start to see the first signs of roots popping out of these. And that's a good time, I find, to transplant these into pots. And then you just keep it watered, and you will eventually start to see the leaves poking out, and you can transplant that in the spring. You will want to make sure that you don't put them into tiny pots, because it sends down a fairly long, compared to the size of the seed, taproot initially. And you really don't want that taproot winding around the bottom of your pot. Ideally, you would start them in something like a quart-sized yogurt container, which would give the taproot quite a ways to go. And then you would obviously transplant that very carefully in the spring, but they do transplant easily at that stage. Now, what I've found, though, is moving a semi-mature or mature beach plum bush is very difficult to successfully do. I have killed 2 out of 3 of the beach plum bushes that I've tried to move that way, because they really establish themselves in the soil. And when you try to dig them out, you damage that root structure, and it's very hard on the plant. So they don't always come back the next year. So I would say plant them where you want them. don't think that you're going to move them successfully once they are mature. And the places that I've planted them this spring, last spring, I actually planted quite a few with the intention of weeding some out. So I just wanted to make sure I had plenty starting, and a lot of them did succeed. I will probably have to weed out more than I would like to, and once again, I will try to transplant them, and maybe if they're young enough, they will transplant. But I don't have a lot of hope for transplanting them. Now, the beach plum is one of those plants that you can put in your front yard even if your neighbors are not so friendly toward front yard gardening. It's a bit of a stealth edible, meaning that you can put it in your front yard. People will just think it's landscaping. It produces beautiful flowers in the spring, and in the fall you get berries that are not very ostentatious. You can have these growing, and probably people just think it's an ornamental. Personally, I like to make a show of my garden in the front yard. I like to show people that I'm planting food, and I found that people really appreciate it and think it's kind of neat. But if that's not the case where you live, beach plum is a great option. So thank you for joining me here. You can also find me on Instagram, and you can find me at the new website, foodforestgardenclub.org. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you have a great day.